When people are negotiating, they always want a good result. They want a fair result. Everybody wants a good result when they're negotiating. Quite understandable. So how can we enhance our chances of getting a good result? Well, before we go down that path, I want to talk about what a good result is. What is a good deal in a negotiation? And there are a number of characteristics of a typically good deal. One is that it's going to meet your interests, or as many of your interests as possible. It's rather pointless going into a negotiation, or rather leaving a negotiation and not having any of your interests met. That would not be a good deal. Certainly a path you don't want to go down. And another good characteristic of a good deal is that it's doable, that it's workable, that it will take the test of time. We don't want to walk away from a negotiation 5 minutes later, scratch our head and saying, I'm not sure that this is actually workable in my organization. That type of question you want to address before you get into the settlement stage. Another characteristic is that both parties feel there was a degree of openness in their communication, that there was a degree of trust and respectfulness. These play an important part. After all, you are trying to build a degree of a relationship, or at least enhance or maintain a relationship. And that both parties, when there's a good deal, will leave that table feeling that, yes, that relationship is intact, and you know what? I don't mind in the future negotiating with this person again. Another characteristic, and one of the key ones here, is that it is better than your BATNA, your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. I can guarantee you that in any negotiation you go into, there will be other alternatives that you can take if that negotiation doesn't work out. Now, what I can't guarantee you is that those alternatives are going to be good for you. They may not be workable, they may not meet your interests. It's up to you as a negotiator to prepare for that negotiation ahead of time by knowing which alternatives are in fact good for you, and then to select the one that is the best for you, and that's your BATNA, the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So at the end of the negotiation, you can measure the tentative negotiated agreement with your BATNA. And if your BATNA is better, then you take your BATNA. In a good deal, your negotiated agreement will certainly be better than your BATNA. So what makes a good deal? Interests are met, relationship is maintained, no one feels they've actually lost in the negotiation, and that the negotiation result is better than your BATNA. Because remember, if it's not, you won't take the negotiated deal. So going back to the question, how can we enhance our chances of getting a good deal? And in answering that question, I go back to the elements of something called principled negotiation. Principled negotiation is a style of negotiation that grew out of Harvard University a number of years ago. Principled negotiation is intended to be a very powerful form of negotiating. Now, powerful in the form of getting your interests met, not powerful in the sense of destroying the other party that you're negotiating with. And the first element that I want to talk about is that of interests. We are there to get our interests met. Some people go into a negotiation with demands or positions. What we want to try to do is figure out what are the needs that are underlying those interests. We want to discover people's interests. We want to ensure that they understand what our needs are, what our interests are. And by the way, it's obvious that we want to get our interests on the table. And people ask from time to time, well, I'm negotiating to get my interests met, which is true. That's why you're negotiating. But is it really important, therefore, that I understand the needs or the interests of the other party? And I'd suggest to you, and any principled negotiator would state that it is imperative that you understand the interests of the other party. When you're starting to create options, what are you creating options for? To get interests met. And if you don't know what the interests are, you won't get very far in the negotiation. Understanding interests is extremely important. It's also, think about it, it's also a good way to build a rapport or a relationship and trust between the parties. People appreciate it when you show an interest in what's important to them. And if you ignore their needs, if you ignore their interests, that is reflected on how they will probably react to you. It's important that you listen to what's important to them, their needs, that you reflect it in your body language. After all, again, it's a good way of getting that negotiation relationship moving. And we've said that one of the terms or characteristics of a good deal is maintaining a relationship. So getting out the interests is extremely important. Now, how do you address interests? How do you get them met? Here we go into the second element of the principled negotiation process, and that is that of creating options, which in my mind is one of the exciting parts of a negotiation. And how can you create options? You can do that by brainstorming. Brainstorming in the sense that you're just trying to get people to open up, to throw out ideas, throw out options, ideas. It doesn't matter if it's a crazy idea or if it's a brilliant idea. It doesn't matter if it's an idea you like. It just doesn't matter, to the point that we're just getting ideas out there. You're not evaluating ideas at this point. You cannot accept one of these. They're not offers. They're just ideas and options. Now, one of the best ways of enhancing a deal is being creative in option formation, and that's why brainstorming is such an effective tool in this regard. Eventually, of course, you're going to have to evaluate the options. You get as many options out as you possibly can, but somewhere down the line, you're going to have to actually assess them. And here we come to the third term, which is legitimacy. Legitimacy, or how we put value behind those options. And the way we do that, we look at objective criteria or standards. What makes or what gives an option value? Well, we can measure it through legitimacy or by using criteria that both parties can accept as an objective criteria. Legitimacy is extremely important also in the sense of how do we persuade someone? Remember, any negotiation is an attempt to change somebody's mind. And of two things. If we're going to change somebody's mind, we're going to have to know where their mind is. We're going to have to do that by listening, by asking questions, by engaging them, watching their body language. The other point I want to make is that at the end of the day, when we think we've persuaded the other parties are finally getting to the point of accepting an initial deal. What I'd suggest at that point, when you think you have an initial deal, go back. Try to negotiate and build on your deal. Can you get more? Can you be more creative by using different options, in fact, to enhance your deal? This is a term that we call Pareto optimality, when you're trying to maximize what you get out of that negotiation. Make sure you've looked back at your interests to see if you've, in fact, dealt with your interests. Go back and see if you can broaden the scope of the deal by looking at more options. Once you finish that, then hopefully you'll have a good deal, or at least a deal that is better than your BATNA. Because remember, if it's not better than your BATNA, you measure it against the BATNA. If it's not better than your BATNA, take your BATNA.